From a scientific point of view, love is not a single thing. It divides into different phases. The first phase usually has a short duration and high intensity. We call this phase passion. Last week, we discussed emotions in general. Today, we will talk about one of the most interesting emotions in human life, passion. From the perspective of the brain, passion resembles a kind of temporary dementia with characteristics of stress, obsession, and convulsion. Love is probably the affection that has most intrigued human thought throughout the centuries. All major mythologies, such as Norse and Greek mythology, well as all major religions like Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, have discussed the question of love in depth. In philosophical thought, Plato was the first to write a great treatise on the subject of love. The book is called De Symposium, and it is one of the most beautiful books in the history of philosophy. After him, almost all great philosophers have grappled with the issue of love. Aristotle, Epicurus, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Foucault, just to name a few. In art, the omnipresence of love is indisputable. Just think, for example, of Shakespeare, or even contemporary cinema, where even in movies about dinosaurs and alien robots, they find a way to include some romance. But, far from being something metaphysical, something outside the body, love is the result of alterations in brain function, and generally divides into very specific phases. The first phase we call passion, and it is characterized by great intensity and short duration. But what happens then inside your brain when you are in love? What happens inside your body when you are in love? Like all emotions, passion is regulated by what we call endocrine factors, meaning it is regulated by the action of hormones and neurotransmitters, which are chemical substances. These chemical substances have general effects on the body and specific effects on the brain. Okay, I would like you to think about the psychological states involved in passion, such as longing or the great motivation that is often present in a person in love. Each of these states is the result of certain changes in brain circuitry. First of all, studies show that two hormones are especially involved during passion, oxytocin and vasopressin. These hormones have various roles in the human body, but during passion, they function as neuropeptides, which are small chemical compounds that act locally in certain brain circuits. The action of oxytocin and vasopressin during passion is associated with attachment and the connection formed between the couple. Additionally, they are also associated with the preference that the enamored subject has for that specific person. This means that during passion, we are extremely linked and connected to the person we are in love with. Moreover, this person seems unique. They capture our attention and have a greater focus in our brain. They are more salient to us than other people, which perhaps explains the feeling we have that this person is irreplaceable. We also find receptors for oxytocin and vasopressin in another brain circuitry that we call the reward circuit. Rewarding stimulus generally involves two elements, motivation and pleasure. One can give some examples of stimuli that are highly rewarding, such as caloric foods, for example, desserts and ice cream, certain drugs, like cocaine, even challenging activities for our brain, such as a very engaging book or a movie, or even a professional project. As I mentioned, the reward involves, first of all, motivation, which is when our body compels us to do more of what we are doing. Imagine, for example, that you are hungry and order a portion of fries. You eat one fry, and then what does your body compel you to do? Grab another fry, and another, until you are fully satisfied. This is the motivated state, where your body leads you to do more of what you are doing. This is an important element of reward, but there is another element, which is pleasure. Pleasure is the subjective sensation associated with the rewarding stimulus. In the case of fries, it is the pleasure of eating the fry, the enjoyable sensation of eating the fry. This system involves, to a large extent, the action of a neurotransmitter we call dopamine. Dopamine, like the hormones I mentioned earlier, has a variety of different functions in our body, but during passion, it is associated with motivation and pleasure, and therefore with reward. Passion is a hyperdopaminergic state. That is, during passion, the dopamine circuits we call mesolimbic dopaminergic pathways are hyperactive, which gives us a great feeling of motivation and pleasure. You may have noticed that during passion, you have much more energy and desire. For example, you feel a greater sexual desire. Additionally, you want to travel, different things, and please the person in various ways. And all of this is associated with greater activation in your brain of these reward circuits. Another substance implicated in passion is serotonin. During passion, its levels drop. There is another condition where we know that serotonin levels also drop: obsessive-compulsive disorder. You may have noticed that passion has characteristics of obsession and compulsion. The obsession during passion is characterized by intrusive thoughts. That is, the thought of the person you are in love with keeps entering your mind, even when you don't want it to. You are taking a shower, watching a series, driving, or doing anything, and recurring thoughts of that person keep coming into your head. This is very characteristic of obsession. Furthermore, when you are with the person you are in love with, there isn't a moment when you want to stop being with them. You always want more and more. This wanting more and more, this constant desire for what is in front of you, is very similar to what happens during compulsions. It is no coincidence that recent studies show that people who take antidepressants in the category of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or antidepressants that raise serotonin levels in the brain, tend to experience less intensity in the symptoms of passion. Another hormone involved in passion is cortisol, which is typically associated with stress responses. During passion, our cortisol levels rise. You may have noticed that during passion, you experience the symptoms of euphoria, anxiety, and insecurity. All of these symptoms are typically associated with stress. During passion, your heart beats harder and faster. Furthermore, your digestive system changes. You may have noticed that when you are in love and near the person you are in love with, you tend to feel less hungry. Additionally, during passion, you become hypervigilant. That is, you tend to lose sleep, and all of these are characteristics of responses to stressful stimuli. Therefore, passion involves something similar to stress. Another interesting thing that happens during passion is the inhibition of brain structures we call prefrontal structures. That is, structures located just behind your forehead. To give you an idea of what this means, there is another thing that causes prefrontal inhibition: alcohol. Alcohol inhibits your brain, which might seem strange because, after all, the last thing you feel when you drink is inhibited. On the contrary, when you drink, you feel disinhibited. This happens precisely because alcohol inhibits your prefrontal cortex. Among the various functions of the prefrontal cortex, one of them is to enable us to restrain our desires, meaning to control our impulses, and also to allow us to foresee the consequences of our actions, to anticipate possible good or bad consequences in the future of what we are doing now. That is why when the prefrontal cortex is inhibited, you drink and make decisions you regret. For example, you drink and argue much more easily. You drink and send WhatsApp messages to ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends. You go to a party, drink, and hook up with people of questionable aesthetic quality. Of course, if you keep drinking, alcohol will continue to inhibit your brain until you experience a severe depression of your nervous system, and you become the annoying, weepy drunk who hugs everyone at the end of the party. Interestingly, during passion, you also have prefrontal inhibition. This means that the person in love has a reduced ability to restrain their desires and impulses, as well as a diminished capacity to foresee the consequences of their actions in the future. This makes it a bad idea to make major decisions during passion. That is why someone in love often makes completely foolish decisions, such as tattooing their partner's name on their left buttock. These impaired decision-making characteristics are very similar to what we find in dementias. For all these reasons, passion, from the perspective of the brain, resembles a highly motivational state of temporary dementia with characteristics of stress, obsession, and compulsion. I believe that none of this takes away from the beauty and charm of passion. Regardless of everything happening due to changes in the brain, this does not mean that passion ceases to be enjoyable, that passion stops being a pleasant sensation, of course, when it is reciprocated. Because when it is not, it can be one of the worst pains and angst in life. However, there is one last characteristic I would like to emphasize about passion. It is always fleeting, always temporary. Studies show that the functional and chemical changes in the brain derived from passion tend to last. At most, 12 to 18, up to 24 months. We can look at this realistically and coldly, somewhat sadly. We only fall head over heels in love because at some point we meet someone and fall for them, but eventually we hit rock bottom and wake up to reality. I believe that everyone listening to me has unfortunately experienced this. We can also look at this in a more romantic, more positive way, as de Marais did. That passion may not be eternal, as a flame is, but that it may be infinite while it lasts. Okay. Our video today was strongly based on a scientific article called Love is More Than Just a Dance. You can find the link to this article in the comments.